Hello again and welcome. Today we are carrying on with our building an awesome API. We're using the same API. We're going to be building on our Dungeons and Dragons Dungeon Master Toolkit. This time we're going to add authentication though. So I wanted to do a whole stream about auth. I wanted to make sure that we explain the options. We look at the options and we weigh up what's the right way to do auth for this kind of API. You know, Laravel, there's a load of solutions. There's third-party solutions we can use. We could roll our own. Let's have a look and dive into those authentication options in Laravel for an API. So I did previously write an article on Laravel News about this. Literally like last month. And there's so many different options. There's Sanctum, there's Passport, should we use a JWT? Should we do something else? And basically this walks you through and says, these are the options. This is when I'd use this. This is when I'd use that. So what I'm going to do, just to kind of share it with everyone, I am going to add that as a banner and you should be able to see that now. So feel free to go to
start streaming.
Yeah.
I was trying to catch you before you started.
What's that? What are you buying? Oh, for the boys?
Yeah, but it has a desk and storage already underneath it.
Oh, cool. Yeah, show me in a bit because
I was trying to beat you before this. Hello, everyone. Bye, everyone.
The wife trying to get me to buy more bunk beds for kids. We're just going to start stacking them on top of each other now. But yeah, if you go to that URL, you'll see an article that I previously wrote about API authentication in Laravel. However, it depends how you want to integrate with your API. So this API, for example, is going to be an API as a service. You can build your own front end to work with it. You can build a CLI to work with it, a desktop app, a mobile app, whatever you might need. So this is very much extracted away. I'm not building a client to go with this. So I'm thinking JWT or something like that would be perfect. We've got Sanctum, which would work. We could use Laravel Sanctum. The only problem that I have with Sanctum is having to get a cookie, and it's just a mess to do that sometimes in your front-end framework or in a CLI or in this or that. It gets complicated quick, right? But we could just use personal access tokens. So let's have a look. Let's dive in. I'm not going to talk for too long. I'm just going to focus in on the code and let's have a look at authentication. So we could use Breeze. Breeze has got a relatively good way to do this, but I don't want to. So the way I like to do this is here's my API, here's my V1 routes. I'm going to create a new file and I'm going to call this auth. I'm going to declare some strict types. Let me zoom in on that code. Let's make sure we pull across our facades. So we're going to have a few routes. We're going to have a login route. We're going to have a logout route. Not that I think we actually need a logout route in reality, because, yeah, reasons. We're also going to want a route post register. So these are the main routes that we're going to want. So we could quickly boilerplate this using Laravel Breeze. it does have an API option. So let's go have a look at that quickly. So composer require dev Laravel freeze. It's nice and easy, quick install. We can do a quick freeze install. Ooh. Yeah, this is the biggest problem that I found with Laravel prompts is the terminal height needs to be. So if you zoomed in on a live stream like this, I don't get those options. So if we just go for API only, yes, we want pest. That'll boilerplate some of it, and we can just kind of delete what we don't want, right? That's going to be the quick way to do it. So it will have changed our root service provider and likely auth service provider. Yeah, we can worry about that later. But our root service provider, let's go have a look. So home. So this is used in a few places, which I will eventually delete. I can probably ignore a lot of that for now. Come down to here, web, nothing useful in there that I want. So let's delete it. And auth, all of these, I can start to look at pulling these across. So we're going to want a forgot password and a new password. We could probably use that. Let's put them next to each other and zoom out a little bit so we can kind of see what we need. Let's grab them all. That'll do. We'll grab them all. We want all of those to be over here. And we'll do it in a singular view. So yes, we want register, login, forgot password. Yes, we'll need that. We want to be able to reset that password, email, and log out. So we can import this for now, import this, import this, and there we go. So we've got everything set up. We could, in theory, leave it as is. The biggest problem that I have is it really messes with PHP Stan. That I can fix. These I can fix. Dispatches events, no type value, blah, 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 blah. There we go. So our login request, I can add that to my PHP Stan. Rerun it. Still 32 errors. So we get our login request causing an error. I can fix that in a minute. All of these issues, another issue. It's built to work well for Laravel, but PHP Stan always has problems with it. I don't do my validation this way. I don't do my user creation that way. I want to do it differently, is what it boils down to. So let's go and register our root, or roots, sorry, should I say. Delete that, come to here. And we're going to say root prefix auth as auth, and we want to group base path roots v1 auth.php. So let's make sure that our roots are there. Root list. Where is that even coming from? Let's go have a look at our root service provider, roots API. This is what's the problem. Show history for this. Let's just put that back the way we need it. Roots v1 roots. Now, what we've got is all of our auth routes are here. We've got Sanctum, got auth routes, and the meta routes that we worked on last time. So let's step through our auth and see what's going on. Hello, Ludovic. Let's focus. Let's focus. So let's give ourselves some real estate to start walking through some of these. First thing I want to look at is this. We currently go to here, we authenticate, we regenerate the session, and we return a response with no content. Now that's fine, but I want to do token-based auth. So I'm going to come down here, HTTP, controllers, v1, auth, auth spelt nicer. And we're just going to create a login controller. So this will be invocable because that's how I do things. It's important when you're building an API to make sure you're doing things in the way that works for you. We'll start with just a simple request. So what do we need? A login controller. We'll need to validate the payload. If we've got a valid user, we want to attempt authentication. If we authenticate correctly, then we want to generate an API token. Once we've got an API token, what we want to do is return the token to the user. So that is our approach. First off, we need to validate the input. So make a request, v1 auth login request. This is a login request we're going to want. Screen is a bit blurry. That could be stream quality. Let me know if it's an issue for everyone. I do occasionally have issues with the streaming quality. So declare some strict types. I'm going to make this final. Authorizes true by default, so I can just delete that. This will return an array. And what this is going to be super similar to what this does. It needs the same rules. I can do some comments up here just to kind of quieten down this. So this will be string array. That array will be int string class string or rule, I believe. An implementation of that. Yeah. So that's what that'll be. Validate, that's all good. So what else do? We attempt to authenticate. So I do like this. I do like the way that this works. So I can come down, throttle. I can grab this. I'm going to copy that into my own and walk through it. So let's dive in. Ensure it's not rate limited. Yes, that could throw an exception. No, I'm not bothered about remembering the authentication state because it's an API. So validation exception, yes. Clear the rate limiter, great. We can simplify that one. Rate limiter, too many attempts. Event new lockout, all good. Get the rate limiting key. So this is where things start to get a little bit, whoa, what's going on? So let's split it out into its own line. Lower expects a value, which will be there. Then we kind of tag on this bit here. And what it's complaining about is this input email. So I'm going to swap that to this, which resolves all of my underlined scribbly wibbly problems that just aren't great to look at. And then I can do that. All of that works. All of that looks good. There's no issues that I can see now. I can manage that externally. Any validation errors that are thrown, I can handle in my exception handler. So that means that this login request here is no longer needed. So let me come down to here. That login request can be removed because I don't need that method. It means that that's not needed, which means that's not needed. So in my login controller, validate the payload. User is request authenticate. Oh, sorry, authenticate, blah, blah, blah. I have a logged in user at this point. Attempt authentication, done. This will potentially throw validation exception. So next we want to generate an API token. So token equals auth user create token. The name is going to be something. The abilities for now, I will just stick to like that. Expires at is null. So they're the defaults, but I like to keep them in there. And finally, we want to return the token. So we need a response. So what we've got down here, we've got a collection response and a file response. What I like to do is create a token response. So I'm going to be using token response in a couple of places. So it makes sense to extract it out to a class. Make that responsible. Public function instruct. This will accept a private read-only new token, new access token as token, private read-only status, okay, public function to the, let's get this to generate that to make sure. To response, that's what we needed. That can be read-only. This will return a JSON response, which means that we can return a new JSON response. Data is going to be something or other. The status is going to be this status value. Headers is going to be using the header factory default. A token will be this token, plain text token. And we're good so far, right? We know that when we make a request, we can return this. So return a new token response, where the token is the token. That can be done like that. And the only other thing that we need, what I'm going to do actually is I might wrap this in like a try catch. This is something that could potentially go wrong, right? Throwable. I'll extract this later because I'll need to repeat this behavior, basically. And for now, I'm just going to say that exception. Keep it nice and simple. update the docs. This will return something that is responsible. Any other issues on here? Exception is immediately thrown. Token should be no access token. Sanctum, no access token, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so what we want to do at this stage is refactor this. I mean, I'll test it in a second, but we want to refactor it. So let's test. We've got a media, we've got a meta, and now let's go create our auth. Auth, right. We want to create a login request. This will be a post request to v1 auth login. Method authentication session controller store doesn't exist. So we just haven't hooked it up. And what we need to do is save and change this. There's always things you forget. So what I'm going to use is this again. This will be the last one there. So I can just do that. And I only have to do one import at that point. So, right again. Authentication, blah, 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 authorize. Where is that even being called? Redirect if authenticated. Redirect if authenticated. So, I hate this. We don't redirect in an API. So I'm going to come to the middleware, redirect if authenticated. You can go away. HTTP kernel. I don't need guest middleware, which means that in my thingy down here, I can get rid of that, get rid of that, get rid of that, that, and that. So try again. Oh, where is that even coming from now? Oh my God. Authenticated session controller authorized. I'm going to the login. Let's see what's going on. Controller doesn't exist, blah, 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 routing, dispatch, controller, dispatcher. Why do you return any token without logged? So I'm going to expand upon that, I think. So let's trace this down. We go to the login controller, request, authenticate. This request has an authenticate. Ensure is not rate limited. We can do that. Throttle key, we can do that. Ensure is not rate limited. There's nothing in here that could potentially be causing an issue that I can see. At this point, we want to get the create token. So let's go make sure that our model has API tokens. Create token, we've got that. So why it's calling authenticated session controller store doesn't exist. Perhaps my roots are cached. Add method call. Authenticated. Aha! It's being overridden. That is why. There we go. We're getting there. So accept that the content type is going to be application JSON. We're doing good. We're doing good. Body, we can send over a JSON body payload. We can say that our email is just Steve mcd@gmail.com. And my password is super secret password. And we've got a token, which is great. So how do we want to send this information back? That is the question. So right now, this is fine. There's nothing wrong with me then taking this token and then asynchronously getting my user credentials. That is how a lot of these systems will work from a, I don't know, a perspective of Nuxt, Next, Svelte, all of the ones that I've used. What I can now do is no cache, that's fine. I don't want to cache the token. Move this PR. So we've got our login route. The only thing we really want to do is we want to extract that. There's a few ways we're going to want to do some token creation at the end of the day, right? You are late, but you have not missed too much. We're using Laravel Breeze and we're going to rebuild it to a way that makes me happy, in effect. So the way I like to do this is app. And this app isn't going to be big enough to use domain-driven sign right now. It might get big enough, but right now it's no way near big enough. So I'm not going to go to all the hassle of setting that up. So over here, I'm going to go create commands like I usually would. And identity. So identity is basically just our auth. Create token for user. Public function. We want to use our constructor because we want to then say, okay, let's use the database manager as a database. And when we come over to our actual handling of this action, we want to pass in the name. We want to pass in an array for abilities. And that's going to default to that. And this should return a new access token or a model. So this can then return this database transaction. The callback to the transaction will just say, actually, we kind of need to pass in the user as well, right? We want to say user create token where the name is name, the abilities is abilities, and that is it. Attempt it twice. This is potentially going to throw an exception, which is fine because we're going to catch that on the other end. Why is that? I got an error. Blah, blah, blah. Has parameter abilities with no type values, so it was all away. Okay, so this is going to be int string. We're basically just going to pass through almost a comma separated list at this point, right? So we can make this read only, grab this, come over to our controller over here and say, okay, in my constructor, I want to pull this in. So public function construct. I want to then say private read only command. Yes, I can still add my dog blocks. And I can make this read only. It's great. And all of this, I can then say my token is this command handle. The user is auth user. The name is, for now, something. The abilities, for now, will just be that. And there we go. So blah, 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 authenticatable. It's there. There's a way I can do this. I might just ignore that part for now because it's not hugely important this very second. So I can come over, create a new exception for identity, and I can say, create a new exception called failed to create token. Extends standard exception. I always add just 2 lines there, so it's formatted nicely. So my login controller, I can just say, so new failed to create token. The message, authenticated, but failed to create API token. Code, status. I mean, technically, this exception should have a code on it. And we can pass that previous ones back, so we've got full traceability. For now, I'm just going to say PHP stan ignore next line. That will do what I need. At this point, we should have a token, new access token, eloquent model given. So I can limit this and just say, actually, no, I want to make sure that it only returns that. That'll work. Remove that. That now works. And we're good. We can now authenticate. So we've got a token. You can see I've got 4 tokens. And our login is working with something that is reusable right there. But yeah, it's about 10 lines or so, give or take. But yeah, it's working. It's great. What more do I need? Move on. So I can log in. Next, let's register. Delete that. Name register. So when I create a new user, how do I want that to work? Well, I come through to my controllers, v1, auth, let's create a new file. Registration controller. We're going to have a invoke method. We're going to want to create a new request. We're going to create a registration request, which we can then inject into our controller. We can go through and we can make this work the way we want to. We can do that. We can delete all of this. And then if we come over to that authenticated session, destroy, register user, we can literally just grab this because that's all we need at this point. We need this. Registration request. Import that. It's all good. We're going to return an array which has a string. String array. That array will be int string class string, or we come over to here, a rule, validation rule. That now fixes that. Method should return array string, blah, 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 blah. Rules, password. Okay, I'll be specific with that. So I can just do that and hopefully that'll shut it up. Okay, well, I'm not too bothered about one squiggle. Should return array. Okay, let's just say that we're returning that. It didn't like my class string. That's all. It's not the end of the world. So our registration controller. So at this point, we know we've registered. If we come back to our authenticated, not our authenticated session, not our login, create token for user. Let's close out some of these. Registered user. We then want to go ahead and create, fire an event, and log in. So at the minute, this returns no response because it expects you to then generate a token on a separate request. But that always feels like a pain, right? So let's come over to identity and let's say create new user. Again, public function instruct. We're going to pull in our database manager. And we're going to handle our command. So this will need to accept something in. So this is where I come over to HTTP, create a payloads v1 auth. The payload I'm trying to create is for a new user. This will accept some parameters. This is basically just a DTO at this point. So I will have a private read-only string for the name. We'll have a read-only string for the email, and we'll have a read-only string for that password. We want to be able to create this easily, so we can say static function from array. That'll accept an array and will return a new user. So we can say return new user. Let's add some doc blocks. So it's better. So we can say, okay, so what we're going to pass into here is an array shape. We're going to say we've got a name, which is a string. We've got an email, which is a string. And we've got a password, which is also a string. So up here, we can then say the name, the data, where's it gone? Name. Email is data. Email. And the password is data. Password. Nice, easy way to recreate it. So what we also want to do is nice, easy way to also return it and save it in the database. At which point we're going to return the exact same sort of thing. We're going to return the name of this name. The email will be this email, and the password will be this password. This part, somewhat simple. this can be read only. I can have my doc blocks, and this is now, for me, good to go. The only thing we're not doing is actually using it. So my registration request, I can come down and say public function payload. This is going to return a new user. Return new user from array data. The name is this string name to string. Email is this string email to string. I'm keeping as much type safety as possible here, right? And at this point, I can just pass through the hashed version of the password and say value is going to be this string password to string. And that is type safe. That is type safe. Everything has got type safety, and everyone is happy. I can then take this. I can say that I'm going to accept a new user as my payload. I'm going to return a user back. So I can return this database transaction callback for this. Let me delete that because that's not needed. We can just say that we want to user model query create payload to array. Attempt it twice. Other than that, throw an error. Simplify that. Make it read only. And there we go. At this point, everything is good. Everything is working as I would expect it to. So I can grab that create new user, come over to my registration controller, public function instruct. I can inject it. This is another command. I can say my user is, I think it's try catch. User is this command handle where the payload is the request payload. I can catch any potential exceptions. Pull that in, come down to my exceptions and say failed to create user record. Extends exception. This can throw a new failed to create user record where the message is failed to create a user. The code is exception code, and the previous is still that exception. At this point, I know I've got a user. There's my command, but now I need another one. So private read only create token for user token command, and then I've got to do this again. So my token at this point is this token command handle where the user is the user, the name is something, the abilities is that. We want to catch that exception and say that we failed to create token, failed to create token for user. But if we look back at our login, we're doing the same thing. which I hate repetition. It's a bane of my existence. Let me just check my calendar. Do I have anything today? No, I do not. Perfect. So what do we want to do? We want to look at a workflow. We want to look at a process. We want to run this, then we want to run this. That is what's important for us right now. Yes, we can keep it in line. That's great. There's many places where we want to create a user. There's also many places where we might want to create an API token for a user. So let's look at a repeatable pattern. So I've written about this before. However, I'm going to do it from scratch so you can see it. So we want to create processors, identity. We're going to create a new registration process. And I'm going to create here an abstract process. Yeah, this will be abstract. This will have technically it can be private, I think. So private array of tasks, public function will handle the process. This will return mixed. And this will then say return. We're going to use the pipeline facade. We are going to send an array or an object of some description. I'm going to handle, send a payload. Through the tasks and return. That is all we need. So blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that's fine. So I can do this. This is an array. And what it's going to be is, what am I doing? That. It's going to be an int string last string. This. Can handle that. Iterable type. Well, it's most likely going to be an object. So I'm going to make sure I'm passing objects. This will return mixed. I can't do much more than mixed right now. I mean, I could say, okay, I'm going to return an object out the other end. And that's about it. Okay. I have to return mixed unless I'm going to do something funky dunky with casting around this. So that's the most I can do right now. So registration process extends the abstract process. I can create some tasks. I can say my first task would be to create a user. I'm going to call that create user task. Public function construct private read only create new user command. This has to be invocable, I believe. So we're going to get an object payload coming in. Then we're going to get a closure next, and we're going to return mixed. So I can take that. I can try and do this. So I can say this command handle payload is payload. Best I can do right now, blah, blah, blah. So object, this should be of type new user in theory. Will it allow me to do that? Hopefully, let's see. Then we're going to catch the exception, and we will say that new failed to create user record, where the message is failed to create a user with that payload. Previous is the exception, and we'll just add in that code as well. The code is exception get code. And then finally, we can return next, passing in the payload. So what we can do at this point is say, okay, the payload is the result of whatever comes back from this command. New value type is not matching. Okay. User. There we go. And this payload here, what I can do is drop the read only, make that part read only, make that part read only. Then we can say, okay, we've got a public property, which isn't read only, which is going to be a user, which will default to null because we're going to need it later. And then I can access it in registration process, create user task. So payload user equals user, pass the payload through to the next job. So I've taken the payload, ran a task, catch any potential exceptions, and passed it on into there so I can extract the user from the payload should I want to. So let's make these public. Public array tasks. And we will have a create new user. That is first step for the registration process. Then we're going to have create API token, which will do something somewhat similar. Let me just do that. All of this is then repeatable, jigsaw, easy to use code. I'm just going to copy this same thing and just edit what I actually want to use within the create API token. So let's just pull all of it in for now. So create API token. The command will be create token for user. Not that one. So I can then get rid of that. The payload will be the same. Import that. And import that. This command, payload user, the name for the token, the abilities will be like that. So it's not perfect, don't get me wrong, but failed to create token, failed to create API token for user, get code, blah, blah, blah. Don't need to do anything like that. On that payload, I can then say that my public null new access token let's update this, come back to create API token, and now my payload token is token there's that. Keep that quiet. Next payload command, property can be read-only, make that read-only. This is going to complain. At this point, we know that we've got a user, so there's potential for failure, but there shouldn't be failure. So create API token. So first off, let's go back to our registration controller and let's test this. So at this point, we're going to return a new token response, where the token is a token. The status this time will be status created, because we just created a new resource for that user. This is going to be responsible. There's a lot of repetition, but we're handling that. We're not going to do anything with that yet because we can come back to it. So let's test. Let's just duplicate this. Duplicate as register. Name field, great. Name, Steve. Email's been taken. Send password confirmation. We've got no content coming back, which is not what we expected at this point. Roots, auth, we need to hook it up. Registration controller. And I can just swap that for 2. Send it. We got a token. We failed. Great. So we know that works. We know we can get that API response back. Everything's all good. What we want instead, private read only, registration process. You want to remove that, get rid of all of this. The payload we're going to receive will be wrapped in this file block here. This process handle where the payload is, the request payload. We can get the payload back from there. We can catch anything that is throwable and throw that exception. This can probably just be unwrapped. At this point, we can just say payload. Let's add some type hinting to it. So var the user payload token. That is going to cause a potential error, but we shouldn't ever hit that. So this can now be read-only. And let's go here and let's say that's going to fail. That's fine. Number 3. Argument token must be a token called in blah, 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 registration controller, line 34. 34. Okay, let's dine dump on the payload. So it's creating one, not the other. So at this point, we've got a user being returned. Registration process, create new user, create API token. What do we have here? We've got a user. Okay, but what do we have here? Still got a user. Okay, so this is just creating a user. Create token for user. Yeah, create token. Token for user, create token for user. Let me do something funky donkey's going on here. Taken. Still just getting a user for some reason. What could be triggering this? We want to send the payload through these tasks, then return. Yeah, we do want to do a then return at this point. So if we come over to here, we're going to go through that task, then that task, create token for user. Let's test here and see what's in our payload at this point. So we don't want to pass the user through as a payload. We want to pass something else. So yeah, we need to slightly refactor some of this, I think. So our commands, create new user. This is fine. Getting a new user payload. We want that. Creating a user. We want to something like, I don't know, public function, set the user. I'm going to return that. So we're going to pass through identifier. So this user equals ID, return this. Bring. Good. So at this point, when we create this new user, we're going to come back to creating a user task. We've got a user there. Payload user, the ID user, get key. Cannot cast mixed to string. Okay, I'm just going to say ID and we'll fix it with properties on the user model anyway. So at this point, we've amended payload and we're going to pass it through. However, I'm wondering if it's working correctly. We'll update the payload and we'll send that through. See, I shouldn't need to do that in theory, but I'm going to. Oh, you're going, aren't you? I will be back in 2 seconds, people. Can you hear me? Oh my God. Did I just do all of that? Muted. Oh, what am I doing? What am I doing? Well, all of that is that we've used an identity service instead. We've moved from doing it in line to doing it into like a process pipeline, which didn't quite work the way we might have hoped. So we moved that to an identity service, which calls the original commands so that we can have a call for commands directly, or we can call the service. The commands are injected into the service to then be called through. Everything is testable, which is great. We can abstract upon that if we really want to. We can start to add interfaces so that in our tests we can use nullable contract commands, push it into the service so that when it's resolved in our test scenario, it's just returning what we want. It's an easier way of mocking. Yeah, there's a lot we can do with this. There's a lot of fun to be had. I am going to call it a day there. Sorry if my audio crapped out. I will be back. What day is it today? It is tomorrow. I've got meetings galore. So I will be back on Friday. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for joining me. If you have any questions when my mic was muted, reach out on Twitter. I'm always about. Make sure you like the video if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to get notified for the next one. Drop a comment if you get some useful feedback for me. Or drop a comment if there's something that you'd like to see me do next with APIs. Can be Laravel, can be PHP, can be Go, JavaScript, you name it. Ask away. I'll see what I can do. I'm going to carry on building this API. Whether you want me to do it on live stream or not is entirely up to you, but it's going to be a lot of fun. So thank you as usual. Stay awesome and have a good rest of your day. Goodbye.